So here we go. In this match up against Tank, I am playing as the Empire from viewer request, and the goal is going to be winning the cavalry fight using this Hellblaster volley gun. Franz will keep any casters far and away, and it is just Kemmler, so I'm not especially worried about him. Hopefully the Hellblaster can take out quite a few of these Blood Knights. My Demogryph Knights can go ahead and deal with the White Kings, and Franz can dive into on top of them to hopefully take out a good number of models, or put in a good amount of damage onto these White Kings. Demogryph Knights will want to be cycle charging infantry. That will force the Blood Knights to come in to support, and once they actually move in, you can see the Hellblaster can actually put in some pretty nice work against them. So it's essentially just a single unit of Blood Knights left up against my, or it's 1.5 units of Blood Knights, which is a pretty great situation for me. My Demogryph Knights will far outclass them, and even though there are Vargulfs, I do have Franz that can come into support. I'll be bringing in a few of my guns too, and it looks like some nice screening with these spears is going to stop my charge, and some zombies could shut down the Hellblaster. I'm going to bring in my cavalry to support there, and as for the Vargulfs, Franz is going to try and put in a little bit of work against them. My Demogryph Knights will want to stay as safe as possible. My spears are going to be blocking up as many undead units as possible, and that's just so that the Hellblaster can continue to fire. Some of my spears do get surrounded here, but that is just more time for my troops to fire in onto the cavalry. As soon as these zombies are gone, I should be in a much better position, but actually, I completely forgot Franz was actually in the mix, and I'm going to have to heal him up and try and escape here with him. He does die, that would be rather painful, and I'm going to bring in some of my troops to support, and Franz will be pulling through his spears. So just barely making it out alive, a little bit of a scary situation, but he does make it, and the Hellblaster does get to do a lot of damage. And now, the big fight against all this cavalry. I've done a lot of damage with the Hellblaster so far. I have the silver bullets firing in. The only thing that I'm missing here are my buffs. Franz, you really want to have his buffs on him to do well in fights like this, so that the Demogryphs have their anti-large bonuses, but even without that, I think the fight should still go okay. Demogryph Knights are quite hardy, and it looks like my front line is doing an okay job too at holding up this front line. Franz, still with that overcast regrowth, is able to stay alive, and it looks like the Blood Knights are very nearly down. So after that, it will just be the Vargulfs, and then I should be good to go. The Hellblaster is still online too, and now I'm going to turn it to fire in onto the Grave Guard. For my spears on the flank, they'll be coming back to try and support the Demogryphs, but there is a little bit of a problem now. My Demogryphs have actually taken quite a bit of damage. I'm going to pull them back into a safer position, healing them up with my Jade Wizard, and hopefully with the now dead Blood Knights I can pull in an advantage here, but it'll be a little bit of a scary situation since the Vargulfs are actually still at pretty decent HP. So let's take stock of the situation. I have Franz and the Demogryph Knights, so all a little bit beat up, actually quite beat up, and this will likely be a loss if the balance of power has anything to say about it. But Franz, if he can actually snipe out a few of these key targets, that will be very important. And I can keep him fairly safe with the Demogryph support. They're going to stay in the fight here while Franz finishes off these Vargulfs. And the Jade Wizard is going to be putting in a ton of healing too to keep everything alive. The fact that there are a ton of skeleton spears here though is really bad, and a zombie summon too on top of my Demogryphs is looking like it will likely cause the loss, since I can no longer really retreat with these Demogryph Knights, and Franz looks like he's still having a pretty hard time actually killing the Vargulfs. But with another buff, that will help with my anti-large a bit. Most of the infantry have traded into each other, but I think given that how bogged down the demogryphs are, yeah, it's going to be army losses, and that's going to be GG. Pretty brutal game. Essentially, I didn't have much to kill off these single entities there, and in the end, I also got swarmed by the infantry. The idea of killing the Blood Knights was okay. I could actually kill them with the Hellblasters, but there was nothing to actually kill off these Vargulfs. They all got some pretty nice damage, and not to mention, I also forgot about Franz in a blob, which was probably the main misplay that I could have prevented. Kemmler. I might have been able to snipe him out, but he's usually pretty slippery. I think it was mostly these two guys that ended up killing everything. My demogryphs too, sadly not getting a ton of value. I'm wondering if I could have cycle charged the infantry more. So definitely some micro plays and some large misplays too, leading to a pretty straightforward win for tank. So here we go. In this next match, it's going to be tank with a fairly large wood elf army, actually mostly infantry, up against my heavy dragon prince build, coming up all the way to 3 of them with a ton of archers, which is the usual high elf playstyle, except in this case I do have quite a I have much less in the form of spears, which is a little bit scary if you are getting rushed, but in this case infantry rushes aren't nearly as scary for me. There are some archers here in the distance, and that's actually pretty good for me. They're deep wood scouts, so they won't do too much damage to my lion chariots, and I can actually use them to just plow straight through these forces. My dragon princes also are going to be diving in to the back line, and as for Drycha, she's going to be diving in straight to try and get her... She's going to be diving in to try and get her summons off. They will be running into my Lothern Sea Guard, however, so that's not too scary. And as for these Deepwood Scouts, my Dragon Princes are now able to converge on them, but not before getting charged themselves by a few of these Glade Riders. It's just that these Dragon Princes, they take very little damage from Glade Riders, so that really shouldn't be too much of a worry. I will want to start moving in aggressively, though, to actually support these Dragon Princes, and the chariots will hopefully be able to assist in that situation. As for these Dragon Princes over here, they're taking a lot of damage, actually getting caught up on a few spears, and I might lose one, but with another unit of Dragon Princes now diving into the back line, I'm feeling fairly comfortable here. The Lion Chariots should be able to engage too, and as soon as the Glade Riders are gone, I think I'll be okay. I'll be sending in Alariel. A few of my Dragon Princes are caught up by spears, but the Wood Elf infantry are, even though they do have spears, they're not extremely proficient at actually killing off my troops. Not to mention, I'm also bringing in my archers to support, and the goal right now is going to be grouping up as much of my cavalry as possible for a big Star of Avalorn. But that's no guarantee, as these guys are having a bit of a hard time actually converging towards each other. I'm going to try and get my Lion Chariots too in range, and hopefully the Star of Avalorn can heal most of my troops up. As for one of my flanks, a few units of cavalry are able to dive in onto my archers, but they are just Glade Guard, they're not especially scary. Especially if I can get Lothern Sea Guard in there, I should be completely fine. Some of my Dragon Princes coming back too will be able to continue pressuring all of these High Elf archers, and given the amount of chaos in the back here, I think I should be okay. Probably my main goal right now is to keep my Lion Chariots alive, since there is so much Wood Elf infantry, and the chariots should hard counter them. So that's going to be the plan, microing these chariots as best as I can. I'll be sending them into the forest, which isn't the best situation for them. I've also lost quite a few of my cavalry units now, which is a little bit scary, as I won't actually be able to easily chase off these deep wood scouts. But actually, yeah, that's a little bit of a bad situation. I am running extremely low on cavalry, and it seems like I will have to rely entirely on these lion chariots to do most of the work. That and my archers, of course, which are still doing fairly well. So I think that should help out. The lion chariots in the forest too will be nearly unkillable, since it will be quite difficult to actually fire in on top of them. And as long as my archers stay safe, I think I'll be in a decent position. Alarielle will have to be a bit careful so that she doesn't get sniped out. And I do actually have a few rallying dragon princes to help cycle charge this infantry, so that's definitely very good. Some Glade Guard are going to be surrounding my chariots. Not the best situation, but I think they still win that engagement. If they lose it, then that would be extremely bad for me. So I'll be holding my breath, hoping that they are able to come out on top. Some of the deep wood scouts are firing in on top of them, so that's not great. But I think the lion chariots, if they routed off these Glade Guard now, these Glade Riders, that's good. But there we go, the chariots have actually fallen. And that is very bad. Essentially now I just have to rely on these 14 dragon princes to carry out the win. And of course my many archers, who are now going to be kiting back as hard as they can. Let's see, they'll be firing in onto the dryads, I guess. There's a few spears here, but the cycle charging dragon princes can definitely assist in this situation. I can throw down a Star of Averlorn too to make them essentially unkillable. And I'll just be pulling in and out of these spears, hopefully taking them down eventually. These dryads do get routed off by my archers, which is very good, but there's still quite a few more spears, and the rallying archers too are going to be a bit of a problem when it comes to my actual retreat. Some deep wood scouts also that I'll need to fire in on. I am leaving these Eternal Guard in combat with my Lothern Sea Guard, and that's just because they aren't especially they're not crazy scary up against spears. They have enough melee defense where these Eternal Guard shouldn't be able to do too much damage. I am a bit worried about Drycha though. If she has another Dryad summon, that could definitely cause a lot of problems. And I've also run out of cavalry. So definitely not a great situation, but a bit of healing onto this infantry will definitely help. And these Eternal Guard should be getting routed off soon too. Still, my archers are getting caught up. I'll need to retreat with them. And these Lothern Sea Guard, I guess they'll have to try retreating too, but they may get routed off. Even if they do though, they should be able to escape with the help of the Dragon Princes. And I do still have quite a few archers nearby that can start picking off these infantry. Alarielle too, with her cycle charging, will likely be a pretty big help. And that's going to be the name of the game for now. Just using Alarielle to delay and kiting with my archers as best as I can. I'm intentionally getting her caught up in some of these Eternal Guard, since that does... she's at fairly good HP, and that lets my archers fire into this blob. And once they're routed off, that should be enough of an infantry advantage, I think, to do fairly well. All of their leaderships are pretty low, and another volley should get them out of the battlefield. Alarielle diving into, charging them in the back, will be causing leadership breaks. And there we go, one of them breaks, which should cascade into the rest of them falling. The more dryads are coming in, but they aren't too bad since they are very unarmored, and my archers can get a good amount of damage on them too. So essentially, it's just going to be Drycha left at the end of the game. And given that she's the main threat here, I think the goal is going to be cycle charging her with Alarielle. As she is the main strength of the Wood Elves now, and I'm nearly running out of ammunition. So as soon as Drycha is done, I'll have the Lord advantage with Alarielle. And And then she'll be able to help my infantry win out their respective fights, given how much healing I have. But it's definitely going to be a bit of a close situation. The Wood Elves too still have a lot of ammunition, and that's actually going to be causing a lot of problems here. Let's put in some healing onto my troops and loose their final volleys at these dryads that I definitely don't want to get engaged on. I'll bog down Drycha with these archers and then hope that's enough to actually kill her, since she's actually done a pretty good amount of damage to Alarielle. So things could definitely get a bit dicey, but she is in the midst of combat now. She is going to get surrounded by some infantry. Alarielle will be getting her charge attacks in, but there we go. That's some pretty big hits on Alarielle, and it looks like she may get routed off. That would actually be the win for the Wood Elves if Alarielle routs, as the leadership definitely not high enough to actually keep it together. I'm going to send her in for one final charge, just praying that she doesn't get hit, and hopefully she can rout off Drycha. But a big play from Tank, a pendulum onto all my troops, last minute pendulum coming in, pulling out the victory, and that is going to be it. Oh my goodness, pretty brutal games, and I think that just came down to my cavalry control again. The Dragon Princes should have been left in reserves, and my dive-in was a little bit too risky. The Lion Chariots too died way earlier than they should have, just taking a ton of damage from archers. And I think that's basically it. Had I been more patient with these guys and waited until the archer fight went down, I think I could have won that game for sure. But well played to Tank, good control, nice pendulum plays, and a pretty good job keeping the archers alive using the spear support. So here we go. It is a Bretonnia rush build up against Skaven. There is a unit of Warp Lightning cannons, so I'm going to leave most of my cavalry back until my infantry gets a little bit closer. The Hippogriff Knights are going to take to the far flank, so that the cannon hopefully turns towards them, and that'll give more time for my cavalry to close this gap. Looks like the cannons are firing in on my damsel too, so she can pretty easily dodge that. There could be a bunch of Skaven guns in the back here, so for Lewin, I'm going to be staying well and safely at a safe distance with him, as I definitely do not want Lewin to get sniped out by some stealth rattling guns. So that's going to be the plan. My infantry will engage, and then hopefully my cavalry will come in at the same time. So given that the infantry is fairly close now, I'll begin moving in with the cavalry. And the goal is going to be, I guess, just routing off this front line of clan rats so the infantry can push into the rest of the army. There's actually not a ton of Skaven infantry here, so I should be able to win that fight decently well. Warp Lightning Cannon is now shooting onto my cavalry. They'll be taking hits, but a little bit of dodging back and forth can dodge some of the damage. And with the front line now underway, I can give my charge orders and hopefully start breaking through this front line. Lewin and the Hippogriffs. I guess the Hippogriffs can start routing off the Poison Wind mortars since they seem fairly undefended. But this army over here is coming into support, and I'll need to disengage the Hippogriffs as quickly as possible. The Warp Grinders could actually shut them down fairly hard. And it looks like they will be able to escape though. As for Lewin, he can dive in onto some of these troops, and I guess he'll be going for the Packmaster. It's a little bit of a risky play if there wasn't support, but I do have quite a few troops here. And I think Lewin should be able to survive fairly well here. He'll be throwing down a ton of debuffs, and that'll also allow my Hippogriff Knights to come in and rout off some of these guys just by charging them in the back. See, some AoE is actually coming down over here. Looks like Ikit throwing down some AoE. But it only hits a few infantry troops, that's no problem. And the main goal right now of winning this fight seems to be going in a decent direction. I've routed off the Poison Wind mortars, and all my cavalry has almost free reign in this situation. The Hippogriff Knights are going to pull back, charge the Warp Lightning Cannons, and then charge again back into this blob. And Lewin, he's going to be diving in on Ickit Claw, since that should be a pretty big leadership debuff for the forces of the Skaven. And if I can actually get some picks here, that would be really good, as he is rather exposed. As for this fight over here, I fully surrounded the Skaven, and I've gone quite a bit of damage here. My knights are trading into these forces, and it looks like I will actually be losing quite a few knights. So in the vein of actually keeping them safe, I'm going to pull them away, and hopefully they'll be able to survive to cycle charge another day. In the late game, the cycle charging is much more important than trying to trade into this blob right now. So as long as enough of them escape, I think I should be good. A lot of Skaven forces are routing too, so chasing them off will be very important. And as for the fight with Ickit Claw, it looks like I have managed to rout him off. Lewin is taking a few shots from the Warp Lightning Cannon though, but him along with his buffs, or his missile resist buff, should be able to stop most of the damage there. Many of my knights have actually died though, so in that sense that is sort of a mission failure, but I think I will be able to win the game as I have killed off Ickit now. That's going to be a huge debuff on these monstrous troops for the Skaven, but actually there is a chieftain here, and he does actually have, yeah, the power grab ability, which means that yeah, it actually doesn't matter that Ickit got sniped out. The leadership for the Skaven will remain, and that's going to be a little bit of a problem. The breaking the leadership is very important, and now that I actually have to grind it out against their monstrous units, I will be losing quite a few units of cavalry. Still, I have Lewin at high HP, and enough damage will still rout off these rat ogres, so I think I should be fine. The Pack Master 2 will be going down shortly, and as soon as I can shut down this Warp Lightning Cannon, I'll be feeling a lot more comfortable, but it's already gone a lot of shots into my cavalry, and I did a bit of a bad job actually shutting it down. Still though, I have a unit of knights. They'll be moving past to try and dive in on top of it. I will be losing my Damsel of Life, but I have Hippogriff Knights and Lewin to kill off the Pack Master, and I will actually be able to shut down the Warp Lightning Cannon finally. So that's definitely very good. Healing is gone, but Lewin has regeneration, so I think I should be able to stabilize in this situation. I'll use the Hippogriff Knights to chase off the Pack Master, along with some spears, and Lewin with his terror will finally be able to finish off this Warp Lightning Cannon. At this point, it will just be the chieftain left for the Skaven, and Lewin should be able to take that fight quite decisively. There is a lot of infantry here on the Skaven side that will be converging, but I think Lewin has enough DPS to kill that guy before most of my troops get bogged down. I do lose a lot of my cavalry still though, and that is definitely pretty brutal, since there's a lot of infantry I have to cycle charge, and it looks like the chieftain actually does manage to stick in the fight for longer than I thought. Thankfully Lewin does have a good amount of mass though, and he can simply pull away to cycle charge. So that should work out pretty well. I still have these Hippogriff Knights too. On the charge, they will be able to rout off the rat ogres. And as for this chieftain, I don't think he has regeneration, so the goal right now is just going to be cycle charging him as much as I can before I run out of infantry. So Lewin diving in, gets in a good attack, and is going to be disengaging. My last remaining units of cavalry are going to be cycle charging, I guess, these storm vermin with halberds. In the late game, storm vermin, they have a ton of armor, and they can slowly pull down Lewin. So I definitely don't want him to be stuck in a fight against them for too long. The chieftain does manage to protect them, but he gets a bit out of position himself, and I think I'll likely be able to surround him with my cavalry and hopefully get a few more hits in with Lewin. My Hippogriff Knights can come back too, and they'll be able to help out a ton versus the infantry also. Chieftain is also nearly down, and as soon as he's out, should finally get the mass routes on Skaven that I was looking for. But it is actually looking pretty close this game. The Chieftain is routed off. I do have a major single entity advantage, but the Skaven have a huge infantry advantage. And given how much cavalry I have left, things could definitely get a bit dicey. It really depends on if I can rout off these troops or not. It looks like none of them are the Council Guard though, so it should be fairly easy to rout them off. Now that the Chieftain is gone, Lewin can move in and charge these guys in the back to hopefully get a pretty big chain rout, as the leadership is quite low on most of these troops. They are just Clan Rat Spears, and as Lewin dives in, we're seeing terror routes turning into normal routes, and that should be it. A pretty close game, I think a bit closer than it had to be. Interesting tech on the Chieftain, making it where a snipe on Ikiclaw was actually a lot less useful than I would have thought. Still though, things went fairly well. I am pretty sad that I lost so many knights unnecessarily diving into the back. I probably could have pulled them out a lot earlier, and I think I was just too confident leaving them in combat. The Hippogriff Knights still did okay though. And I also needed to make sure that the Damsel didn't get sniped out by the Warp Lightning Cannon. And as you can see, it actually did get quite a bit of value. Actually a lot of the Skaven forces got quite a bit of value. But in the end, Lewin ended up carrying the day thanks to his single entity killing strength. 3,300 damage value, definitely very good.